Welcome to the Daily Horror Habit Podcast. I'm your host, Jay Krieger, bringing you daily reviews of currently streaming horror movies for your twisted pleasure. Be aware that these reviews may include mild spoilers. And as always, I hope you enjoy. This week I'm joined by friends of the show, Berto and Sarah, to review Drew Goddard's 2012 meta-horror comedy, The Cabin in the Woods. Hey guys, how's it going?
Hey.
Good. I appreciate you guys coming on as the first guests of Daily Horror Habit.
Thanks for having us. This is so
It's
fun.
exciting, yeah. I'm pumped for it.
So I thought before diving into our discussion of Cabin in the Woods, which is currently streaming on Amazon Prime and Hulu, it'd be fun to kind of just share the first horror movie that scared each of us as kids. So Sarah, do you want to go first?
Sure. The first scary movie that I watched was The Exorcist, and I was in 5th grade.
Oh, geez.
So I feel like it's kind of like a big jump to the first scary movie.
That's like starting in the majors.
Yeah. And like my mom thought was like, yeah, great idea. So one snowy day we had no school, and my mom was like, yeah, let's watch The Exorcist. And it terrified me. Yeah.
As it should.
Yeah.
What's one of the scenes that you remember kind of sticking with you the most? Because, I mean, there's so many, but...
Yeah, I think I blacked a lot of it out because I was so scared. But I specifically remember like the barf scene where she's just like throwing up on everything and everyone. Right. I think that kind of like imprinted on me because not only was it scary, but it was disgusting.
Yeah, I'd say.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I would say that.
Yeah,
but it scarred me for life, you know. Doing fine now. Right.
How about you, Berto?
For me, I think The Conjuring. Conjuring was pretty intense. Yeah, that was a pretty scary one for me. Like coming from a I guess religious background with my parents and stuff, and it's like that kind of demon stuff just freaked me out, and that was pretty scary.
It really stuck with you.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of those movies that's like that was one of the first, other than like, I guess Emily Rose Exorcist, which is pretty creepy, was also up there. But I think The Conjuring was really stuck with me. Especially when like the mom turns and it's just like, it was just crazy. She just freaked me out for a while.
So I'm getting his demon possession is not for either of you.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, for me, did you guys ever see Poltergeist?
Oh yeah, I seen the
no.
From back in the day. There was a Steven Spielberg movie about a family that has a poltergeist in their house, and that was like I think it's PG, but it's one of those movies that somehow back in the day skirted around a lot of the different types of like ratings and stuff. So there's like a ton of gnarly scenes in that movie. Like at one point they have to get these paranormal investigators to come into the house to try to suss out what is going on. And then one of the guys goes into like a bathroom and he looks into the mirror and his face just like starts melting.
Oh, what
and
the
like,
hell?
as I was probably 7 when I saw that, and it kind of just comes out of nowhere. And it's just so aggressively gory over the top for like a kid's PG movie that it just like completely caught me off guard. And like, I didn't look in mirrors for a couple of weeks after that because I was so terrified.
That's surprising that it was PG and with all the gore. It sounds really gory because usually like they can skirt around if there's no like human blood or something like that. But if it was also really gory, I wonder how they got that rating.
I mean, I think part of what was so shocking about it was that the rest of the movie is not that gory. It's mostly kind of just like things are moving around the house, like furniture starts stacking on top of itself. Yeah. So how they were able to like sneak the scene in where, I mean, the way that they did it was like wax was melting off of this guy's face and then his like skull is revealed. It was just super graphic and super out of like left field in a way that was very traumatizing to 7-year-old Jay.
That's crazy.
7, too. That's pretty young for a scary movie.
Yeah, it was not my dad's best moment, but it gave me the horror bug, as it were. Yeah. But
at least it was... I would say it was a positive experience for you after that. You're like, oh yeah, I'm really into it.
Yeah, it kind of screwed me up for life in a way, but but I think it's a good time to transition into our movie that we're going to review today, Cabin in the Woods. Was this a first time watch for either of you guys?
No.
For me it was. Yeah. I like seen part of it, but I never watched the whole thing.
I'd seen it once before, but I don't think I appreciated it as much as I did on a rewatch.
Yeah.
Just because, you kind of know what to expect going into it, and then all of the sort of like little Easter eggs that are along the way that are hidden in there.
Yeah.
But so for those that don't know, The Cabin in the Woods is about 5 friends' weekend cabin retreat turns hellish when zombies descend on them. But they quickly learn that there are more nefarious horrors than the undead pursuing them. I think for me, immediately what stands out is just the simplistic nature of the movie initially.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like
it starts out just like any other scary movie.
Yeah, I mean, the premise is like anything else. It's very much like something like The Evil Dead, where it's just friends going out into the cabin for the weekend. But I think that first scene is really, really great, where we have the 2 characters that are in the water cooler talk.
Yeah.
And you're kind of like, what the hell is this about? Like, I thought this was about kids in the woods. And there's like these 2 guys talking about just like normal stuff. And they're like riding a golf cart down in this facility. And then it just says they have the graphic splash of The Cabin in the Woods. And then it immediately cuts to the other kids. And I was like, this is such a random start to the movie that I didn't remember at all. But I think in a way it's great for setting up, like keeping your engagement. Because if the movie had started kind of with just them driving to the cabin in the woods, you'd be like, okay, I kind of know what to expect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's like the Evil Dead movies, you know, like it's the same premise. So I feel like if they did start like that first scene where they're in the girl's room and she's like, oh my God, you're blonde. Like you would have just been like, okay, like this is just another like stuck in the woods, just like teens getting murdered kind of thing. But the water cooler scene I thought was really interesting because like you said, you're like, who are these guys? And what does this have to do with the cabin in the woods?
Right.
Yeah. I personally like the quirkiness of it. Like it's just like very geeky, quirky, but at the same time, it's got its creepy moments, and it's very like even the beginning, you're just like, oh, it's going to be another teen movie, but then it kind of the way it builds up is pretty nice. The way to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the movie's kind of building upon this idea that they're just there. The whole film is like exploiting genre tropes, basically, and it's showing you something that is so oversaturated in sense of like the setup and whatnot, and all the character archetypes. It's like nothing is very surprising at face value. So that way, when the movie does start to reveal more about itself and you kind of learn about what's going on behind the scenes, it kind of really turns into something special right from the start.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It caught my interest.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean, before coming in, like watching the movie, I kind of had an idea of like what the plot was, but like the way I enjoyed it more because like the way it builds up to it, like the first scene where we see the eagle flying and it crashes into that like wall of whatever the
invisible barrier.
Yeah, that barrier that it crashed into. I'm like, oh, this is very interesting. Like I wonder how it's gonna go from here. Like because we kind of know what they're getting themselves into in a sense.
Right.
And I was just interested in like, how is it gonna be good? Like what kind of movie is gonna be? And it definitely has like its moments and like where it's actually pretty creepy, and then it has its funny moments, and then it has like its dorky like comedy moments, which is I find that they did a really good balancing all that out throughout the movie.
Yeah, I was surprised at how I'd forgotten how actually like creepy and jump scares and the amount of jump scares that were in this were. Like I was watching with my brother who's never seen it, and he like jumped out of his chair a couple of times, and even I was caught off guard because I forgot how well the film blended all of those different things, where it blends the horror elements and the comedy elements, but also kind of like just exposing these tropes again, where it's like, it's showing you something that you would expect to see, but at the same time, it has that little surprise attached to it.
Yeah. It's very interesting how they like you were saying, blending it in, like they show the teens, and then they're like, then it goes and pans and it's like behind the screen where the office members are, and they're like moving levers and things are coming out of the ground. So it's like, it's interesting to, like you said, the movie tropes, you see them on the screen, but then you see like the background of like how people are manipulating them. And they like talk about things that they did like weeks prior to them coming to this. So it's like they're building and building and building it to this final end. So it's really interesting. It's a cool concept for a movie.
Yeah, and I forgot how central Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins are, the two main guys that are working for this secret government facility that's like overwatching everything. Like their banter back and forth, I love those two, kind of just like them arguing about like the best types of monsters. And then the more that we find out that everything is being concocted by this agency. They're constructing everything that's happening to these teens in the woods. And then you see kind of just like it turns into almost like Office Space in a lot of ways. You see like people around the office like bullshitting about these insane things that at the same time is to the viewers like very strange, but to them is just like any other Monday or Tuesday.
Yeah. And they kind of like play on that a little bit, like how we, the audience, think it's strange. They had that one character who was like the security guard or something. And he's kind of like, the girl walks over, is like, oh, you think we're sick for doing something like this? And he's kind of like, yeah, it's a little bit messed up. And so she kind of is like, oh, this is how we like blow off steam or whatever. And so we're still like in the back, like, yeah, but they're still dying. There's still real people dying. And they're kind of like laughing and joking. Like one of the scenes that I think is like one of the most amazing parts is they when the final girl, the virgin, is getting attacked by like that giant scary zombie guy, and they're all cheering, they're like popping champagne and they're like cheering and like going crazy, and then in the background of their party you can see this girl having the worst day of her entire life. She's getting thrown around, and like there's like a bear catcher in her back, and it's just like the juxtaposition with like the partying and like the worst day that someone could ever live through, and it's crazy that it's just happening at the same time. I thought that was like one of the best scenes. It made it like the craziest to me.
It has like this Truman gruesome to it, like a Truman show kind of like, but just to a gruesome level of like just aggressiveness, like seeing people get chopped up and like eaten and then like fall in these traps. It's got this weird, like, it's very enjoyable. I wouldn't say it's like very like, it's not scary at times, but it's like very enjoyable just to watch it and just like, whoa, like people actually doing this, and like it's kind of messed up in a way, you know?
Yeah, I mean, Truman, I mean, that's a great point. Like the Truman Show element, especially when Chris Hemsworth and his girlfriend are like out in the woods and they're making out, and she's like about to take off her shirt, and then it cuts to all the guys that are in the office are just standing there just like staring. It's just like, oh man, this is not only like horrifying that they're making light of like people getting killed, but also they're just like all super creepy and weird.
Yeah, they're enjoying it at the same time. So it's like they're enjoying it, and also like the quote unquote gods are as well.
And I mean, just to piggyback off of the scene that Sarah mentioned, one of my favorites is the betting scene where they're all taking bets on like which of the monsters is going to show up or which one's going to be summoned. And then also, completely just blanked on that scene that I was going to say. But yeah, I mean, it's a great to see just juxtaposing the different experiences that the characters are having, and how everything in the cabin is basically a Easter egg or a nod to another famous horror movie in a lot of ways. Like the one item that they summon is basically like Pinhead from
the guy with the razors.
Yeah, the guy with the razor blades in his head and all that. And I think when I originally watched this, I was not nearly as big a fan of horror. So I wasn't able to appreciate that there's like 100 different horror elements that you can draw from other things. So I think I didn't have as much of an appreciation because I probably hadn't seen most of the movies and things that it's referencing.
Oh yeah, that's
so now, too. I don't know, 9 years later, I'm able to appreciate those things a lot more.
Yeah, it's kind of cool how like they show in the lab, like they have a list of different animals or like different monsters.
Yeah.
They have like written down, I guess, and like certain items summon certain monster, which is kind of neat. And yeah, like you said, like I've never really like seen it, but like to realize like, oh, that's cool. Like they can summon each main monster from like a different movie, like specific movie. Like I think they have some referring to aliens. They have like the werewolf, it's just like classical monster, and like all these different like monsters from different movies. I think it's kind of cool that they kind of threw that in a movie. Like it definitely sets like, it kind of like stands on its own in that sense. Like we haven't really seen that before. At least I haven't, where a movie does that, like taking all these villains from all these different movies and throw them all in there. It was kind of neat. It was kind of neat.
I remember the scene that I couldn't think of. It's the one where it's revealed that this is not only something that happens in America, but it's an international organization where we see Richard Jenkins goes over to the monitor and he's got one for like Brazil. He's got one for Japan. And then my favorite part is when he gets to the Japan one, they have basically the girl from The Ring. Supposed to be Samara. And the kids, she's like terrifying a bunch of school kids initially. And then later we come back to that and the kids are like standing around her and they're like putting her back in a box or something. They've defeated her. And Richard Jenkins just leans down to the camera and goes, "Fuck you" to all of these movies. It's just like that was what he was betting on, I guess.
Yeah.
And the fact that now the gods aren't being appeased by them, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I just like that. Not only is that a hilarious moment, but it's kind of an idea similar to. You ever see like the Belko experiment?
No.
Where
Is
it's
that the
about
prison one?
That's the one where they lock a bunch of people in an office building and you have to be the last person to survive.
Oh,
Yeah,
no.
yeah.
Mhm.
But
I've heard of
the,
it. But...
Yeah, so at the end of that movie, spoiler, it's you find out that it's not just this one office building. It's an event that's occurring everywhere in the world. So it's like it's this criminal organization that's spread everywhere. And I really like that the kind of like conspiracy angle that they add to the Cabin in the Woods with that, which is pretty cool. And I mean, it's not a movie that I think would ever get a sequel based on how it ends.
Yeah.
But it is cool to think like there were all of these different horror influences, and it wasn't just US horror. We saw little bits of like South American horror and Asian horror as well.
Yeah.
I like that they also introduced some video games related characters too. From the game Left 4 Dead, they apparently, I've seen that they have different monsters when they show the cubes of different monsters they have. They showed a bunch of like the characters from that game. I think it was like Resident Evil, I want to say, but I'm not quite sure. But I know they do have a bunch of like game reference evil or monster kind of.
Interesting.
They were supposed to, they're actually supposed to make downloadable content for Left 4 Dead because when the game was out, the movie came out, but they had further money issues. Like this movie apparently was supposed to come out in 2011, but they had a lot of financing issues, which I can't imagine why. Like just how good this movie is. You would think that Lionsgate, I think it's Lionsgate, they would have just kept funding them.
Maybe because it wasn't like a conventional scary movie.
That's a good point.
They were afraid only like a niche market would enjoy it. But I think like I'm not the biggest scary movie buff. I get scared in like 2 seconds. That opening scene that you talk about where like Cabin in the Wood popped up, the first time I saw it, I jumped like out of my skin. And it's just the title of the movie. So it's like I don't do very well with scary movies. But my sister watched this before I did, and she was like, "Sarah, you have to watch it." Like because she knows I love kind of like twist endings and like spooky. And she's like, "It's not scary. It's like a thriller." But like for me, it's like one of my favorite movies. Like I said, I'm not a scary movie buff, but surprising to hear that they weren't interested in pushing this movie because I feel like it does, like everyone can enjoy it, not even just the scary movie buffs like you guys. So
yeah, it really is a horror
interesting fact.
Yeah, I mean, this movie really comes across, and they even said when they're developing it, they wanted to develop a love letter to horror fans, and it really feels like that. But at the same time, it doesn't alienate in a lot of ways. Like my brother's not a horror fan either, but he still is able to enjoy it, and it's mostly because of that blending of humor and horror. Like on some level, everybody likes to be scared, and I think with this movie, the scares are more jump oriented, like especially with the zombies. Like even that made me jump. I forgot when the zombies show up out of nowhere. And again, it's more scary because it's more in your face. And even when at the end we see all the monsters, we have the jailbreak and there's more gore and blood and whatnot. It's more cartoonish. It's not really scary per se, even if it's an awesome sequence because we get to see all of these different monsters in the same place, just like ripping through all these people. But it's it feels more kind of like a video gamey moment in a lot of ways. So that's probably one of my favorite elements of the movie is how you could show this to fans that aren't, or rather people that aren't fans of horror, and they could still really enjoy it. It's almost like an intro to horror.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, definitely. The
and
scariest
also,
parts for me are the zombies. The zombies, I think. And so like what you were saying, when everything gets purged, it's like you kind of are not scared anymore because it's kind of jumped into a different area.
Yeah.
So it's like you do see the scary people, like the clowns and like the doctors like ripping people apart, but it's past like a scary point now, and it's more of just like a really interesting plot twist.
At this point, you've basically seen behind the curtain, the Wizard of Oz's curtain, like seeing how you've seen everything's been revealed, and now we're kind of just like reveling in the chaos of these monsters ripping all of these people apart.
I'm glad they had that scene because I feel like they we get to see that they have so many different monsters, and we probably would not have been able to see all of them throughout the movie. So I'm glad they kind of had that scene where it's like they all get unleashed and we get to see what kind of monsters they are.
Yeah.
It really just kind of like, because I feel like it's just having all those monsters in there and just like, oh, look at all these options, all these things they could have hit to unleash all these different kind of monsters. And it's like, well, there's only 5 people. It's like you're only going to see 5 monsters. But if they all get a chance to do that, and I'm glad they threw that scene in there though, like to let them like hit the I guess it was like the red button, like the do not press button kind of moment. Where it's like
who would ever make that button in the first
Right.
place?
Exactly.
Like when would you ever need that button?
Right. Exactly.
And it's like that's how it's like you say, the love letter to the horror community. It's like everyone knows that these tropes exist, and no, they don't really make sense in real life, like the purge button.
Right.
Yeah.
When will that ever be needed?
Yeah.
In this situation, when they need to get away, but
also I feel like the placing of that button, like it was literally in a hallway, like it was this kind of like funny moment. It's like in the hallway, like there's like 3 different elevators, I guess, and it's like who would have had that button? Like that's like the release all monster button in a hallway where like the elevators are, and it's like it's kind of, I guess, it kind of to their like comedic moment, I guess. It's like it's like I guess we could just have this because it can cause havoc and just wreck everything. It's kind of nice,
Yeah, and I love the scene when Dana and Marty kind of go down to the sub levels, and we kind of realize the scope of what's going on now. And then they give us that wide shot, that shot that starts in close, but then it zooms out and shows you all the different boxes with all the different monsters. I really loved how they had such a wide variety. Obviously, for a horror fan, it's cool to see this variety of monsters and spirits and whatnot. And it's got really cool. It's got surprisingly good CGI, but also practical effects and things like that. But it's cool that we're able to see a variety, and that's so important to not alienate people that aren't fans of horror, because it basically taps into any fear that you could have. Because you have zombies. Obviously, you've got the Hellraiser guy. You've got the unkillable clown. You've got the tree from Evil Dead that's like
giant spiders
grabbing people. You've got the snake. Like, there's one of everything. And so the idea that you would alienate somebody is impossible, because you can't not be scared of at least one of those things. So it kind of gives you that scare that you need, even if it's not over the top going to give you nightmares. It still kind of is still shocking in a way that I really like.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and they have like the classic ones, like the werewolf, and then that ghost, like a spirit, and then they have like ridiculous ones, like that robot that just has a bunch of like killing arms on it.
Yeah, the saw blade robot.
And then there's like the nod to the strangers with the people with like the doll masks, and there's like a unicorn in it, which I thought was really funny. So it's like they use things that aren't like to the core scary, like unicorn. They see it and they're kind of like, oh, and then it just spears a guy in the stomach. And then it just like just shows the insanity that's going on in that final part.
I gotta say though, for me, I think the main zombie guy that was chasing them, I think that was
the bear trap chain.
Yeah, that was pretty cool. I really like that. That was a good. I guess that was a good villain to have, like just to have them, like, because he's also huge and he almost has like this like zombie like, but like gigantic body with like the ring facial features, because like the hair just hanging down. It's like a mixture of all this like worst nightmare kind of zombie. And he basically never dies.
Yeah, he was the scariest one.
Yeah.
Oh, for sure. And he's the one that keeps popping up too.
Yeah.
Out of nowhere.
When he comes out from the water and you like see he just like raises up. Oof. It's so scary.
That's the thing that I think is also really well done in this, and that we've said now that it's a mixture of scares and it's also a mixture of humor. But I feel like those things, for the most part, for the first half of the film, are very separate. Like you have these scenes that is focused on horror and it's portrayed as a horror movie. It doesn't come across like it's slapstick or anything like that. It comes like it's almost like they're just playing the horror part straight, and then it cuts to a little reprieve of humor. But then the farther we get into the film and all of these different things are being revealed and we learn what's actually happening, they start to blur those lines a little bit, and it feels like that's the way that you should do that. It feels more appropriate.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Now that by the end of the film, you've basically seen behind the curtain, so you know what to expect. So they made a conscious decision to blend those two elements more so into something that becomes slapstick in a way that's actually really fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I never thought of it like that. Yeah, it's like they're very, very separate in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they're going on at the same time.
Yeah.
They do a really good job at blending. I feel like there's moments where it's like they show them in the cabin and like it just gets it's like not like it's like extreme scary kind of in a sense, but then they show them in the office or like in the lab and it's like kind of very comedic moment where it's like a lot of laughing. Yeah, more laid back, but it's like I really like the balance of like taking it to a different extreme. Like you have an extreme of fear and scary, like everything that happens in the cabin, obviously it's frightening. It's actually pretty creepy because like they pop out of nowhere and you can't really tell where they're coming from because it's so dark. And then you go to the lab and it's like almost this funny moment where like people are betting on who's going to get killed, how they're going to die, and like who's next to go. And like, it's just like, I really like that balance. And then, like you said, like near the end, it's kind of like, well, it's not going to be as scary because we know what's happening, you know, we know what's happened behind the scenes. So they kind of blended everything together. And I think they did a really good job at that. Like from the beginning of the movie where it's really intense to like the end of the movie where everything's smooths everything together. I think they did a really good job at producing.
Yeah, I think so. I want to know what you guys thought of the characters because they're supposed to be playing to these very stereotypical archetypes. Like you have the stoner, you have the virgin, you have the jock and whatnot. And I think for me, my favorite character is probably the stoner just because because in movies, the first one to get killed is always the one that gets too high and wanders off and gets murdered. But in this, him being a stoner is actually, instead of being a hindrance, is like the saving grace of him because he's the only one that can like think outside of the box and be like, this is probably what's happening. And he's got all these very like introspective things to say about the world and society and whatnot. And it's just funny to see them completely flip that archetype on its head and be like, oh no, this guy's actually like the voice of reason when there's no reason that it should be.
There's like a part where one of the girls in the office says something about him like she mentions the weed and he's immune to everything that's going on because of the weed. And so they're like, the chemical department messed up, like he's immune to it. And like, that's when like everything starts going wrong. But you know, like you said, it's interesting that it's always the stoner, like you said, he's the first one to go or like the slutty one. And to have him be almost the hero of the movie.
Yeah. Speaking of departments, I love when they try to escape in the RV and the explosives don't go off in time.
Oh yeah.
And then Bradley Whitford is like shouting at the guy like, what the fuck are you doing? That's your only job. It wasn't my fault. Something malfunctioned. And like, they have to like pull out a faulty chip or something. And it's just like every single thing that could happen in a horror movie, they have covered, especially like Chris Hemsworth's character is in the woods and him and his girlfriend are going to get it on. And then they like press the pheromones button. It just really makes teens horny. Like all of these little things that we laugh about and make fun of about a lot of genre movies in this, it just capitalizes the format of this movie capitalizes on those tropes in really a flawless way. Like,
absolutely.
I can't think of a version of this movie that could be better in terms of anything. Like
when it goes back to when you're saying the favorite characters, Chris Hemsworth is probably one of mine because he plays that jock stereotype so well. I mean, physically he looks like it, but just like the doofy kind of guy. And then especially the scene with the motorcycle where he's like, where, you know, like this is the turning point of the movie. Like he's going to go out and he's going to get the people and he's going to bring them back. And he's like, I've done jumps bigger than this. And then he just slams into that wall. And the two left characters are just like, oh, like, we're going to die. We're not going to get out of this. And I think I like that in his character where he's like steps up and is like, I'm going to be the man. And then it just is totally destroyed in front of them.
I love he finally steps up because up until that point, like he does nothing. He like clotheslines one zombie or something like that. And then it's like the jock is supposed to be the leader. And yet he hasn't done any leading.
He's like the macho man guy that's like supposed to like kill people and kill whatever needs to be killed. But yeah, I really like Sarah was saying, like that scene where the jock does get killed and like you're left with the nerdy and the stoner, which I feel like in most scary movies are the two first people to die.
Yeah.
We're kind of left like, it's like a reverse, like you said earlier, like it's a reverse of like what you would expect in a scary movie. And I don't know. I think it's like, for me, I wasn't expecting it to be like that because we're so used to like the nerdy guy, like doesn't only knows about books and reading and stuff, doesn't have any common sense, and then you have that guy that's always high, like out of it, not really paying attention. And now you have them surviving, almost like they're the last two to survive.
Mhm.
And I think it's neat the way they did that. I really enjoyed it. It's also a little different than, you know, your average scary movie and in comedy movie, I guess I would say.
Yeah, like what you expect in the scary movie.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Before getting into the next segment, I need to make an amend to something I said earlier. The Poltergeist is actually directed by Tobe Hooper, who did Texas Chainsaw Massacre. The story was written by Spielberg. There was always some conflict of some sort between the two of them on the set. So some people say Spielberg directed, but Hooper actually directed. So I confused the two of them. But now I think is a good time to jump into the segment that I like to call half-assed research that I did about 10 minutes before recording this with you guys.
Nice.
So Goddard and Whedon wrote the script to this in 3 days. Apparently they holed up in a hotel and just kind of like fired out the first draft, which is pretty admirable.
That's really interesting.
I think, considering like obviously it had to go through rewrites and stuff, but I think it's such a strong concept that obviously needed to be refined, but just to kind of get that out of the door in 3 days for the structure of this movie, I think is really ingenious.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job at that. Yeah.
It seems that the thermal coffee mug bong hybrid that Marty uses was a functional mug and bong that they had made, and it cost $5,000 to make, which is insane. Like
people will actually buy it though. People will actually buy it. I'm sure.
I'm sure that there are people that saw this that were just like, oh, I got to get one of those.
Right. Or got to try to make my own.
Sell some merch for it.
Exactly. Hey, they could have financed their money issues if they'd made some of these for people, right?
Seriously,
That's true.
The studio that did the practical effects for the film, it's called AFX Studio, and one of the leads of that studio is someone named Heather L. Anderson, who was the final girl in the original Nightmare on Elm Street.
Oh, wow.
Played Nancy, which was random. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I guess she does special effects now for movies. Kind of just goes along with the idea that this movie is made for horror fans by horror fans, which is a pretty cool fact to find.
Yeah.
We were talking about earlier that water cooler scene, how the movie opens with that, and how it's very strange in that you're not expecting that from the beginning of the movie because you kind of just have a basic idea of what the movie is. And they said they decided to start the movie with that because they wanted to make people think they had walked into the wrong movie.
Oh, cool.
Which is strange. Again, that's a decision that I think would play better with, like Sarah was saying, like a niche audience. People that are like all in on horror, they're all in on weird kind of genre movies. I don't know how that would have played with kind of just the general audience.
Yeah, like if my sister didn't recommend it, if I was just like, oh, I want to go see this movie, I don't know how I would have taken that in the beginning.
Yeah. And I think for a lot of people that are kind of just like, they want a very clear-cut experience, it might be off-putting to them.
Yeah,
so
that would have annoyed the shit out of them. Yeah,
yeah,
for sure.
But I actually kind of like that because it sets you up for something that seems very predictable, but then the setup is that you actually have no idea what's going on until it's revealed, obviously, later.
That's interesting that they wanted to confuse their audience from the beginning. I mean, it's a kind of, not that the movie is confusing, but it does go back and forth between the office and the cabin. So I feel like it's already starting, like the whole movie is already making you think that scene wouldn't, I don't know, I guess it's interesting that they wanted to surprise them. But
that's a good, I don't know, I mean, that would make sense because it's like, you would think you're going into a certain movie and then you get thrown off by it's actually a horror movie and it's like has all these weird moments, but at the same time it's like you think about their world, it's like they think they're just going for camping, but it's like they're going into a whole nother world where they're gonna die. So it's kind of a little twist there. You think about it, it's like, well, you think, oh, it's just going to be a straight horror movie, but it's like, oh, someone's actually running the show. Like there's people behind the scene kind of taking care of that, like who's going to die next. And they're like, oh, it kind of makes sense if you think about it.
That's an interesting way to think about it. Yeah.
Like there's always a twist to everything in a sense. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, we didn't even talk about the ending. So that's a great way to start. We can circle back to what do you guys think of the big reveal about what is behind all of this? Because they kind of they're hinting at it periodically throughout the movie, where every time one of the characters dies, that the machine starts to move. You see like a cog moving, and then the blood fills up this bowl, basically. And we find out that the reason that they're trying to kill these teen czars is that they act as basically sacrifices for this deity, that if the deity is not appeased, what is it, every 100 years or something?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Then the deities will basically destroy the earth.
Yeah, kind of like reset. It like resets it. In a sense.
It resets them. So I was kind of like curious what you guys thought about that review.
Yeah, that was I wasn't expecting it, but I kind of looked into it because I was like really like not sure. I was like, that's an interesting way to do it. But I like the fact that I guess it's supposed to like reset. Like if he's not pleased, he's like, well, I'm going to destroy this whole thing and just start over again, kind of like in that sense. And I was like, it was enjoyable. Like I guess in that sense, it was like it was all right. I thought I would have been fine with them kind of just like dying personally, but yeah, that's.
Yeah, I felt that the ending, I thought the whole other part of the movie was a lot better than the ending. Not that I was like disappointed in any way about the ending. But it's kind of like I was reading this thing, how they kind of made it as a play as like, we are the gods and like us as the audience members are the gods. And so it's like, if we're not appeased by the story that they told, that we are the ones to like rip down the world, or just like specifically the movie in that sense. So after reading about that, it made sense. But like, as I was watching it, I felt like the whole rest of the movie was really smart and cool and interesting and fun. And I was like, kind of like, oh, it's just like old gods, like destroying or whatever. But when I read up like how they kind of thought that it would be interesting to do it this way, where it's like, it's kind of like a whole crazy experience. It's like the movie, the Cabin in the Woods is happening, and then there's people watching it, and then there's us watching it. So there's like so many different layers. And so then us being the gods or being trying to get appeased by it, I thought that was really interesting. So I think that made the end of the movie better for me.
Yeah, that's a great point, because I think that on repeated viewings, the meta elements of the film, where it's them being watched and then us watching them, is really well done. And it's something that you come to appreciate a little more, because the first time you watch it, I think it is very jarring, which it's supposed to be. And the more that you revisit it, like this was the second time I saw it, and I enjoyed this a lot more than the first time I did, just because I was kind of knew what to expect. But then at the same time, you start to pick up on those little filmmaking nuances that really do make it more than it seems on the surface, which is basically the entire point of the movie.
Exactly. Like you see the little small things here and there. Like in one part, watching it the second time, you see she's like holding a knife or something, and then you see it zap out of her hand. So it's like in every scary movie, you're like, why are you dropping your knife? Like, why aren't you holding on to it? Like, there's still someone chasing you. Or like they hit the killer once, not like a million times, you know? So it's just like, it's kind of giving the audience like, oh, this is why it happens, because someone gets zapped in the hand and then they drop it, or there's pheromones coming out of the ground, or this or that. So I thought that was really interesting.
Or when they're in the cabin and they're all freaking out because the zombies are breaking in and all their doors lock automatically.
Yeah.
Or they're like forced into the basement at one point.
Yeah. And like when the basement door opens, they're like, oh, it must be the wind. And then the stoner guy is like, what? He's the only one that's like, what? And then he's like, can we please get out of here? He's the only one. Actually, maybe he does in the end. He looks at like a film strip, but everyone else instantly runs to that book or like that weird sphere and like the necklace. And they're all like really hyper focused into it. And he's kind of the only one that's like, we should stop this. And then after a while, he starts to look at something, but the voice of reason throughout the whole movie. Yeah. And then you notice that more that I think the second time you watch it, because the first time you're on the ride of, okay, what you're not sure what's going on. So you're like, okay, you're taking it scene by scene. But when you watch it a second time, all the really cool, interesting parts of the movie stand out a lot more. And I think it's worth a second watch. If some people are like, I don't want to watch it again. This movie is definitely worth a second watch.
I think for me, that's probably the reason why I didn't really catch on to the ending much, because it is my first time watching it. And then there are certain scenes that I probably missed just because I was focusing on what's really going on, not really paying attention to the minor detail.
It's overstimulating in a lot of ways.
Yeah. Like, cause
so many things that you have to focus on.
So much things going on. And it's like, it's kind of, I mean, It was good. I'm definitely open to I'm definitely gonna watch it again because I want to really like kind of focus on the things that I didn't catch the first time. But yeah, for me at least, the ending was kind of like could have gone better. I guess they could have done a little better, or it would have been okay for them just kind of like dying off like your usual scary movie or surviving.
That Sigourney Weaver cameo came out of nowhere.
Yeah, that was weird.
Yeah, I mean, she was needed to explain it a little bit, but it was a random.
Yeah, it was it kind of, because for the most part, especially even Chris Hemsworth now, like you say that and you know everything, you know who Chris Hemsworth is, but when that movie came out, his career was kind of just like popping off. So to have all of these, and I mean, Richard Jenkins is probably the most well-known person in the movie, but to have just like this A-lister kind of just show up in the last 5 minutes of the movie, you're just like, this movie could not take any more twists and turns than it already has.
She's also kind of an icon in the Aliens world, so it's kind of neat to have her come in and kind of she almost seems like she was running the show in a sense, like she was like the executive. I mean, the other two lab guys were kind of executing, but seemed like she was like the executive
in charge.
So it's kind of neat to have that.
I think it was important though for the person to be in charge to be an A-lister like her. Yeah. I think if they had filled the film with lots of horror icons, it would have felt more like Scary Movie or something like that. Like something that is
like a parody.
Yeah, exactly. It would have felt like an overt parody in a lot of ways, which again, like I think why this movie is so strong is that the movie starts out and they separate those two genres. And then the more that's revealed, those two genres start to intersect with one another, and it creates a third act that's a ton of fun. Like one of the things that I keep going on about is like the third act in a lot of horror movies is usually pretty weak, just because you've seen all of the scares, you've seen all the monsters, so there's no more suspense really. Right. But with movies like this, it redefines what your expectations are for a third act. It becomes this slapsticky gore bath, which is a lot of fun to watch.
Just blood pouring out everywhere.
So I guess my last question for you guys is that who would be the most valuable monster for you guys? Who is the one horror icon or horror
in this movie
monster?
Specifically, or in general?
No, in this one.
In this one, like what played like the most pivotal role or whatever.
I mean, just which monster did you like the most?
Ooh,
which one stood out to you the most? Because whichever one you pick will be indicative of like the types of horror movies you probably like.
Yeah.
I don't know. I think that the Saw guy, the guy with like all the saws in his head.
Yeah.
I think that was like the scariest for me. Like the other ones are kind of like silly, but like I think for me the scariest movies are like the really like ominous, silent type, where he's just standing like right close up to the glass and is looking her straight in her eyes. And it's just like standing there. He's not doing anything. It's just his presence that is scary. Yeah. So I think for me, that would be the scariest monster, the one that like hit the most for me.
Seems like it's a mental scare.
Yeah.
Almost, like because he has no emotion, no expressions, nothing. He's just kind of just staring like.
Yeah.
That's kind of creepy.
Have you seen Hellraiser?
I've never seen it, but.
Okay. So you watched all of or some of Event Horizon with Berto?
I watched the whole thing.
Okay, so that is the best version of Hellraiser there is. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because the Hellraiser movies themselves, I'm not a huge fan of. That's the movie that the guy's based off of.
Yeah.
But Hellraiser is Event Horizon is like the best version of that. So.
Oh, okay. I did like that movie. That one was good.
Yeah.
That's one of those movies also I enjoy more every time I watch it.
Yeah, that one is like the scary, like the ominous. I don't know. It's just. The guy also reminded me of I watched 13 Ghosts when I was younger, and that movie like really scared me. And something about them like being scary and there, but behind something, and just like knowing that once the door opens, like I'm going to kill you. I think it's like really terrifying, more so than like a creaky door here or there. Like that's obviously terrifying, but seeing your attacker like right before he's going to attack you, not for me.
In Cabin in the Woods, I mean, that's the inspiration for the boxes was 13 Ghosts.
Oh, was it? Oh, well, there you go.
Yeah,
that's probably why it reminded me.
Yeah. I mean, except in Cabin in the Woods, it's more like 1,300 ghosts.
Yeah. Yeah.
How about you, Berto? Which of the monsters stood out to you the most?
I got to say the main zombie guy. I really liked him.
The bear trap.
Yeah, the bear trap guy. I think that was he's pretty badass. He's very intimidating and scary. At the same time, he seems the kind of guy you can't stop him. He just kind of walks through everything. He's just a big dude. He's scary. He's got long hair. You can't see what's in his face. What does he really look like? At the same time, he can just throw that bear trap at you and into that chick and just clap on her back.
He reminds me of a Scorpion from Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Get over here, throwing that on you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that was definitely he's probably my favorite one out of all the guys, all the bad guys.
What about yours, Jay?
For me, it was probably let's see. It was probably the clown because I hate clowns. I hated clowns for most of my life as a kid. And that scene kind of just captures the most terrifying version of a clown, where even if you had a gun and you kept shooting him, nothing would stop him. And if anything starts laughing, the closer and closer he gets to you.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that would have definitely set me off. And it probably the first time I saw this.
Yeah. Just like my sister.
I was probably 18 when I saw this, but yeah, it would have set me off.
Mm-hmm. Just covering your eyes.
Yeah, exactly. But again, like that's a really great compliment to the movie itself. And again, why I think it's a perfect introduction to horror movies for a lot of people, even if you don't like them. Like Berto and I have a friend, Danny, who does not do horror at all.
Yeah. Not at all.
Not at all. Like does not do it, will not give it a chance. But if I was able to coax him into watching one horror movie, it might be something like this, because it has those jump scares that will be unsettling, but at the same time, you're not going to lose sleep over them.
Right.
Much kind of one and done reactionary. Yeah. But then he would also be able to appreciate like the more humor moments and the meta story behind everything. Yeah. And I just feel like, and again, it doesn't alienate people that aren't familiar with horror, because there's at least a dozen monsters that they would recognize just based on the way they look. Like that's a giant spider, that's a giant snake, that's a man-eating bat, whatever. That's a unicorn that stabs people. Like there's nothing, you don't need to have experience with horror movies to be able to pick out certain parts and then still enjoy it for what it is.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. And for the amount of scary things that are in the movie, it's not overtly scary.
Right.
Like you were saying, like it has that comedic to it. It's like when I watch a scary movie, I want to watch something funny afterwards. So it's like a good balance between the two.
Yeah, the movie really
does. You should
try
to get them.
Yeah, I should. That's going to be my next project if I'm able to get him in a room after all this quarantine.
That's true. Yeah, maybe he'll be in a plastic bubble.
Yeah, I'll put the TV up to my window. He can watch from the yard. But yeah, I think also, to that point, like the pacing in this movie is really, really well done too. And even though, again, it's this very minimalist concept that's easy to describe and it's familiar from the outset, it still is paced in a way, again, with those cuts to the office or to the facility underground in a way that really, really kept me engaged. Even I'm more partial to movies that are weird. Like I like stuff that's weird and you don't really know what to expect or what's going to happen. But I think that the pacing in terms of that humor, again, really helps to kind of string along people that might be on the fence about whether they're still trying to figure out if this movie's for them or not.
Absolutely. Right. Yeah.
Well, I also like Sarah was saying, like for people that are very scared of scary movies, like they don't enjoy it, like you can kind of ease, like near the end, you kind of like ease up on the fact that it's not as scary because you're aware of what's like these monsters are, like they're there, you can see them now, and they make a good job at like giving maximum peak scare and then coming down to like a nice little plateau, I guess, to like ease you off of like, it's not like the kind of movie that you'd be thinking about afterwards because of all the funny moments. But I think they do a good job at that. And they also do a great job at like hitting everybody's phobia with the zombie. Like you were talking about earlier, like the clowns, they also have spiders and like different weird things that people are just, they cringe about. I feel like Danny would not like the fact that they have a spider in there.
Okay, I'll conveniently forget to mention that part.
Yeah. So it's like things like that. I think they do a really great job at like hitting all the people's phobia, because I feel like clowns are, for some reason, they don't scare me, but I don't know, I guess like UJ, they freak you out, and I'm sure a lot of other people freak them out too. So
yeah, I don't think I'm alone in that regard.
No, my sister's terrified of clowns, so she's on board with you.
I don't feel so alone anymore.
Yeah.
But unless there's any other scenes that you guys want to talk about, I think that's gonna do it.
I mean, I could pick this movie apart for hours, but
that's the thing. There's so much to talk about.
So much.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's going to do it for our review of The Cabin in the Woods. I appreciate you guys coming on for.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks
Daily
for
Horror
having
Habit.
us.
Anytime.
Yeah, this is so great.
Yeah.
And
maybe you'll watch me scare movies more.
There we go. Yeah. I'll be sure to pass along some recommendations.
Yeah.
But for anybody that's interested in checking out Cabin in the Woods, again, it's streaming on Amazon Prime and Hulu. Thank you for listening to the Daily Horror Habit podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe on your desired podcast platform or follow @Daily Horror Habit on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks for listening.